Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. Background screens for your faith or volunteer organization. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on social media, YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, and on the all-new Church Security app.
Hello, welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mike, this fine day. How are you, Mike?
Doing well. Another day, another Sunday, another broadcast. Here we go.
For sure. And, you know, today was actually a really quiet day. We weren't hunting down raccoons or anything in our parking lot.
Does the raccoon have another life or a friend?
Well, at the moment, he will definitely live to see another day for sure. But if this is your first time in joining us, or you chose to join us for the live broadcast, thank you, welcome. As always, you can visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com for some great resources, or to reach out to us if we can assist you in any way with your ministry and your church safety or security team. We'd love to do that. And as always, you can download our church security app that's available on Google Play or iOS. And so there's some great free resources on there. Actually, it's all free, thanks to our sponsors and thanks to the folks that partner with us. But we have some great resources on there. And I would be amiss if I didn't at least mention the Church Security Essentials Conference in Orlando coming up far sooner than it feels like it should be.
Less than 2 weeks away. And I almost could use the hour tonight to work on that instead of this. But anyhow.
For sure. So we do actually still have a few tickets left and available, but I will
going quickly.
Yeah, they are going quickly. And I will say, if you're considering going, please, don't hesitate, get your tickets now, because I actually had two churches reach out to me today that hadn't purchased any, and they were looking to purchase them for their teams. So if we continue to go in that direction, we'll probably be sold out for the venue and for how many we have available. So definitely some great speakers, national speakers that we have for that event, and some content that you won't want to miss. I don't know about that. I'm not going to classify myself as great. There are a few folks that are going to be there that are far better than myself. But we'll have Ron Aguiar is going to be there. He's a very, very solid veteran of church safety and security and author. Dave Boone Benton will be there. I'm excited about that. Looking forward to meeting him. He, for those of you that don't know, he was one of the operators in the 13 Hours story with Benghazi. He's one of the individuals that went into Benghazi to rescue folks from the U.S. Embassy back in 2011, I believe it was. And so he's going to be there, and just a bunch of great speakers, great resources. So if you are interested in going, there's more information on our website or at churchsafetyconference.com. And you can pick up tickets, and we still have as I mentioned, we still have a few of those available. So, but other than that, I believe we'll jump into the topic.
I think there's one quick throw out there is that we have entered May, and while it's not directly safety and security related, big cause that's near and dear to my heart, and really I'd actually say my head,
Oh
is
yeah,
Brain Tumor Awareness Month. So 10 years ago, I was blessed with miraculous surgery, and it ended up being fully removed and benign. Praise God. But I do like to at least call that out. I'm wearing my gray. So support your
sure.
gray in May, and kind of stand up for awareness for brain tumors.
I was gonna ask you if you were gonna talk about that a little bit, but I didn't know you obviously when
At the
that
time, yep.
happened at the time, and you lived about an hour and a half from me, which is still kind of funny. But at the same time, I'm obviously thankful and happy that everything turned out well. I'm sure your wife and family are as
Yeah.
well.
The quick version was diagnosed with it within 2 months of getting married. So the realism of the vows of "till death do you part" do not become more real until you're facing possible death that soon after getting married. Now, I'm saying that there's some that certainly have faced far worse prognosis than I did at that time, but that insurmountable feeling of, okay, now you need to have surgery, and oh, by the way, if you remember the game Operation and they hit the buzzer, well, the neurosurgeon was like, well, if I hit the buzzer, you're blind or dead. So that's the severity of the surgery at the time. But God had other plans and delivered a miraculous result.
For sure. For sure. And you are here today, and that is the rest of the story.
Thank you, Paul Harvey.
Okay. So on this broadcast, we have the opportunity to actually every once in a while we will have folks reach out to us and ask us if we have a chance to review materials and books and different content. And this is one of such occasions. I'm not sure where I came across the book, but I kind of tracked back the author and reached out to him, and he was gracious enough to put up with our shenanigans and agree to come on and talk to us tonight. So I will bring him in. But the name of the book is Mass Killers. We've shared that book in our Facebook groups and on social media as an available resource. And the author is Mike Roche. So I'll bring Mike in here. So thank you so much for joining us on our broadcast today, Mike.
James, Mike, it's my honor to be here. I'm humbled by the invitation.
Welcome.
I'm not sure if there's any reason to be humbled, but we appreciate you joining us. We're just a couple of guys trying to provide resources for sure.
Well, no, it's a valuable resource. I mean, it's I look at it. It's not just church safety. It's venue safety.
Yep.
Venue security.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, anybody can get worth out of your podcasts, and we're talking about, movie theaters or school auditoriums, concert venues, items like that. I mean, you're, essentially coming into a church, you're walking into a funnel and you're coming into a chokehold. Yep. And you're spewing everybody from the back of the church towards the front. Everybody, if they're fortunate enough to have chairs, otherwise it's pews that, are you've got 10 to 20 people cramming into each pew, and your back is to the danger spot, which is the back door. And, as cops, we always, even to this day, my wife will always sit there and make sure that I'm the one looking at the door, because she's been, after 40 years of marriage, where she's kind of trained that, hey, she needs to keep her back to the danger. But I mean, that's what you're experiencing. And, it's a potentially a very soft target where somebody can come in and, if you can be proactive like you folks are, it's very important, because once the 911 calls are made and the shots are fired, it's too late. And we, definitely saw that in Sutherland Springs, where, that
sure.
individual was able to fire somewhere in the neighborhood of, 700 rounds in, 11 minutes. And it took, a citizen to come to their rescue, essentially. And, law enforcement was a long way off. No, nothing to them. It's Sunday morning and they're spread thin. And especially in today's world, most police departments are very understaffed. So,
yeah, we've had Pastor Frank Pomeroy as well as Stephen Williford, both gentlemen who involved in that event there. They've been on the broadcast, and
I heard the Stephen Williford one, which was 2 episodes, and that was outstanding.
Yeah, it was great that he came on. They both happen to be about an hour south of me. I'm in the Central Texas area. Did have a chance to meet them. It's almost 2 years ago now, in a fundraiser when they were doing some fundraising for one of the gentlemen who was injured in that shooting. They were trying to purchase a ramp for his house because he's now committed to a wheelchair as a result of that event.
For sure. So, Mike, if you could just kind of go back through for folks that maybe don't know your background or your history, if you could kind of walk us through your career and what kind of prompted you to write a book on mass killers.
Sure. So I started out riding horses with Abraham Lincoln. And, so it was a long time ago, but actually, growing up, I initially wanted to, become an astronaut, and quickly realized that anything more than I could count on my fingers and toes was going to be a problem. So, I became enamored with police work and, reading Joseph Wambaugh and watching TV, and that became what my goal was in life, was to become a cop. And so as soon as I turned 21, I was at that point living in Arkansas, and I joined the Little Rock Police Department, which for those that don't know, it's considered the most violent small city in America. So most people kind of think of Little Rock as being this like sleepy southern town, but it was a good place to learn how to be a cop. And, so I worked, predominantly the middle of the inner city area of Little Rock. And then eventually became, worked at street crimes, and then became a detective. And then after about 10 years, the retirement system had become somewhat, let's just call it dodgy. So I decided at that point, I finally had my college degree, and I decided that, perhaps I'd look at the federal level. So I initially went to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, spent a year with them, and then transferred over to the Secret Service, and spent a total of 26 years with the Secret Service. I was assigned to New Orleans, then Miami, to Washington, D.C., and then to Tampa, and landed up back in Miami at the end. So.
Well,
awesome.
But as far as the book,
sure.
Yeah. So what happened was I had actually retired initially from the Secret Service after 22 years on the job. And I was approached by a friend who is a college professor at one of the local universities, and I had taught a course for them once before. And he approached me and he says, "Hey, would you be willing to be an adjunct, instructor for us and teach this class, develop this course?" So I did. And it was a full semester type class. And I thought, it would be helpful to have a textbook to go along with that. So with that, I started writing the book. Well, sadly, he passed away suddenly on it was actually Easter morning. I got the message that he had passed away. And with that being an adjunct, I was kind of, tossed off the caboose like an old Samsonite. And, as a result, then, I didn't have anything. But I was quickly, another company came in, the Alpha Group that focuses on law enforcement training. and they said, "Hey, we're aware of you. We'd like to know if you'd teach this class." And it was a 36-hour class. So we're condensing everything that we know in 36 hours down to 30 minutes here tonight. But and then I went back to work for the Secret Service, and then I updated the book and retired again from the Secret Service in August. So here we are. And it was good enough that Colonel Dave Grossman, who's been on your show before, wrote the foreword to it and gave a very nice blurb as well. So I was quite honored to have his contribution.
For sure.
Great.
Looking through some of the contents, I love how it's not, you don't just look at some of the things that have happened from the aspect of this was a bad thing, that, like Sandy Hook and just those standard things, but you kind of walk people through the ideology behind what makes someone basically what makes someone make those decisions, and then how to identify it, how to consider it, someone's motives, how narcissism kind of plays into, that whole factor. Tell us, if you would, kind of walk us through some of that. What are some things along those lines that that individuals would be beneficial in considering?
Yeah. So one of the easiest ways that you can identify one of these folks ahead of time is through what we refer to as leakage. And leakage comes down to, if you can consider like a boiling kettle that, it's bubbling up in the inside, and finally, they can't hold it in anymore and they have to release some of that energy. And they'll do that either, verbally. So like if you look at the Charleston shooter, for example, a week beforehand, he spoke to one of his friends who happened to actually be African-American himself, and told him that he was planning an attack on the College of Charleston, and that a lot of people would die the week after. But, sadly, a lot of these leakages are either dismissed or ignored. And in this case, they looked at it that, he was either drunk or that was just his crazy talk. And then nobody considered it to be a serious threat. The same with then, some of them will, keep journals. English teachers have been, beneficial in identifying some of these folks ahead of time with some of their essays that they've submitted. And then obviously then through social media. And, like if you look at the guy from that went into First Baptist Church there, he had actually befriended an old Air Force buddy of his and told her, "Hey, I'm picking up, dogs from Craigslist and using them for target practice, So, most people would sit there and say, "What? That's just absurd," and, and report him. And then he went on and said that how he idolized the Charleston shooter, and he wished he had the same guts to be able to go in there and conduct that church shooting as well. And so instead of reporting that, then she just blocked him on Facebook, and nobody knew about it until afterwards. And that's where most of these people, you can look at them afterwards and you can see that, the vast majority of these people are blinking brighter than, the neon lights on the Las Vegas Strip. There's all kinds of things that you're sitting there saying, "Oh my gosh." And, certainly Sutherland Springs, this guy had, a really messy track history. He was just a train wreck.
For sure. I think it's interesting, and I want to go back to the social media aspect that you mentioned, because, and then I'll throw it over to Mike, but we've had several conversations with different churches, specifically about always paying attention to social media posts or things that connect back to the church. When someone, goes online and they type, sometimes it's a disparaging comment about something they didn't like on the church. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's not so simple. And quite a few times we've had situations where churches have reached out to us and said, would you take this social media post serious or not? And we've had, and I'm not sure how much I've shared in past broadcasts, but in the last couple of months, we've had my church has had a few social media posts by different people that have really kind of made us reevaluate and scratch our head and say, okay, what's the next step here? Like, how should we move forward with this? Because maybe this individual isn't quite to the point of threatening, but what they're saying is throwing up what we would say a red flag or something of concern. What are your thoughts on the social media aspect and just identifying some of that?
So, I typically say, hey, look at what we refer to as the continuum of concern, where, they're making statements that are, they're becoming more frequent, elevating, the cause of concern, becoming more specific. And, in today's world, especially, there's, a great deal of anxiety and stress. Certainly, we just came out of COVID.
Right.
Suicides are dramatically up, especially, I think there was a study recently where, during COVID, there was a 22% increase of hospitalizations for children that had attempted suicide. So I spoke to a counselor within the past week, and she was telling me that typically she's always booked about 4 weeks up, and now she's booking anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks out.
Wow.
Because of the stress out there. And colleges, there was a study done there where college students said that in the prior year, 65% of them had an overwhelming amount of anxiety. That again, and the cutbacks, obviously the isolation through COVID exacerbates that situation, and then now you're going into an unsteady economy as well. And that's one of the one things that you really have to look at is what I refer to as the emotional negative vortex, where people have fallen into the darkness of despair, so to speak, and where they would actually be drawn, perhaps going to a church to try to seek some answers. Sometimes it's with the wrong motivations, but those when we're talking about the despair, it's people take, for example, an individual who's lost his job, his wife has filed for divorce, he's filing for bankruptcy, his house is in foreclosure. He decides to go down the street to the liquor store and walks out and finds his car has been towed, and he walks in and the goldfish has died. So I mean, it's just like nothing can go right for him. Sure. So with these people, and then there's plenty of people in the world that go through extremely difficult situations and are able to muster through and get through it. But then if you add in that if their resources are also being impaired, so to speak, by also fighting with mental illness as well, that becomes a cauldron of uncertainty going forward. And certainly people with mental illness are more likely to hurt themselves at any given time. 20% of America is suffering from some sort of mental illness. But when you have people that are suffering from this kind of despair, and then you throw in a mental illness on top of it, their coping skills are really, narrowed. And those are the types of people that you really have to be concerned about.
It's a great point there. I think coping mechanisms is something that I feel like so many are not equipped with these days. And if we look through the period we just went through with COVID, I mean, a lot of people's coping mechanisms that they had left already broken down to a smaller number, they were ripped away. In other words, churches were closed, movie theaters were closed, bars were closed, travel was not happening. So all of these outlets that many times people would use as a way to kind of come down from that anxiety, good or bad, obviously, because even the booze and things like that is certainly not a good thing, but it was their mechanism. When those are gone and they're struck, kind of to your point, kind of floating through all of that negativity, and they're grasping at a lack of resources, and then you add what you said there with the mental health component on top of it, that's enough to make somebody have a mental health crisis just in there, because they run out of mechanisms to cope.
Right. No, and it's an excellent point, Mike, especially like you said, with the churches being closed for, essentially 2 years, and, people having to attend church virtually. It's not quite the same as, getting that fellowship and being able to walk in and having the greeters at the door welcome you and hear the priest, and being surrounded by the word of the Lord there. So, that really, hurt society as a whole. And then obviously then everything else, the schools and work and places that socialize. But I mean, approximately 3/4 of these people that engage in mass killings are also suffering from some sort or have had mental illness in the past. And then you add in another 2/3 have had either suicide attempts in the past or have had suicide ideations in the past as well.
And we've recently dealt with, I've encountered a church that I've assisted with, that they had an individual that had kind of some delusions of grandeur, and you could tell that there was definitely a need for help there. Well, it was kind of manifesting itself as concerns and about rejection, and that rejection was then kind of ramping up. And to your point, it got a little bit more narrowed and focused, and it led to ultimately a tagging event where it was a church was graffitied on a Saturday night right before a Sunday morning set of services. And so there's an escalation there. That to me is leakage. That to me is, hey, this person's needing help. They're seeking attention. Let's get them the help they need, because the next attempt at attention may be much worse.
So that's an excellent point, Mike. There was an instance that occurred at a church in Colorado, and I'm thinking it was around like 2012. I'm not quite sure now. But you had an individual who had been a missionary student and was, asked to leave the program. He was having some mental illness and some other concerning behaviors. He was hearing voices. And again, you have to understand, for these people, that those voices are their reality, and they're actually hearing these voices. So, I don't believe he was able to get any treatment after that. And it was a number of years later that he then goes back to that same school, that missionary academy that he had attended, and asked for a night's lodging. They declined, and he ended up killing 2 or 3 of them. Then he left, was gone for a period of time. Then he spoke to a relative and told them that, he was obsessed, or had a great obsession with mass killings, and specifically the Columbine, Virginia Tech shooters, which goes along. We see this quite frequently. And then he shows up in another church and starts killing in the parking lot there. It was actually a volunteer church safety individual that confronted him in the church. And he was armed. He had like 1,000 rounds with him. So he was ready to go to town on this church, who was in session at that time. And the church safety person engaged him and actually killed him then.
It's interesting. And I want to talk about something that you mentioned, Mike, earlier, about just referencing school and high school and that sort of thing. Let's go ahead and we'll take a quick break. And then when we come back, I want to jump back in and talk about a key a key thing that actually both of you have mentioned. So we will take a quick sponsor break. Don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back.
I'll be here.
Okay.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates, your partner in service.
When you let Checker take care of background checks, you get more time to focus on your ministry. Over 8,000 churches and faith-based communities across the United States use Checker. Checker lets you quickly and easily screen new volunteers, so you'll spend less time on paperwork and administrative tasks. Our fast, accurate background checks reduce turnaround time per applicant by 72% on average. Checker partners with church management systems, including Tithely, Planning Center, Rock RMS, PushPay, and Full Method, so it's easy to integrate into systems you're already using. Trust Checker for faster, easier, more reliable background checks, so you can focus on what brings you all together. To learn more, visit www.checkr.com/church.
At Centurion Bible College, we're authentic about relationships, we're passionate on training, we're unapologetically biblical. And as the first college in the United States to design an associate's program in church safety and security, we're innovative. Explore Centurion Bible College and you'll find the tools to be better prepared to support your community and the mission of your church, the culture to help you engage with the people you serve with, and the environment to foster learning and leadership. Discover Centurion Bible College today. Enhance and develop the skills to engage and connect with your community when they need you the most. Be intentional in your community with a ministry mindset, understand concepts of safety and security, and make a difference today. For more information or to enroll, visit centurionbc.org or churchsafetyguys.com.
The Church Safety Guys help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over North America through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and the all-new Church Security app. Download it today. Help us continue to reach churches by supporting our sponsors, purchasing our resources, and consider becoming a ministry partner by making a monthly or one-time donation. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this broadcast with your team. And now, back to the broadcast.
All right. Welcome back to the Church Safety Guys broadcast. On this broadcast, we're talking with Mike Roche, and Mike was a former Secret Service agent that wrote the book Mass Killers. And again, thanks for hanging out with us today, Mike. We appreciate your time and being able to join us for sure.
No, it's my pleasure. Absolutely.
So I wanted to go back, and one of the things, I had a conversation a few days ago with a high school teacher, a local high school teacher, and they made the comment that because of COVID, to both of your points previously on mental health and some of the negative aspects of COVID, one of the things that the high school teacher mentioned to me was that specifically our school district, which has been a very solid academic, family oriented district, and just an outstanding district in Ohio, has really, in the last 2 years, because of COVID, has really all of a sudden run into a lot of issues and a lot of problems with drugs, with kids being aggressive, bullying, all of those signs and symptoms. And what's interesting to me is this particular teacher commented and said, kids that would never have thought about typically acting out or being aggressive they're seeing now be aggressive. And it's almost like they went back mentally. Those kids went back a year. So now they're trying to catch up and push the kids forward to graduate back in the system with school. But they've said, we've had to turn our focus from actually teaching the kids to really trying to handle the mental stresses with them to help them, coach them through that, because they're not able to focus and they're so distracted that all of these other things that, some might consider inconveniences or petty crimes are just skyrocketing. And the reality is that the teachers are really becoming more mental health agents addressing that than teaching content and subject where they were before. And I find that interesting, and definitely I see this as something that goes across multiple age levels in the church. Like when we talk about churches and how they're involved in the community, that also impacts teens and consideration for teens in the church as well. It's not just adults. So I just wanted to throw that out there just as a conversation point, and you guys are welcome to chime in on that. But for me, it's a lot of times we compartmentalize, well, the folks that come into our church, maybe if they have a mental health crisis, it would just be an adult. And the reality is we're seeing it across all ages. And if that church has a teen or youth program, that program really needs to be aware and alert to this sort of thing as well. And for those churches that have safety or security teams and ministries, they need to be concerned about the youth program as well, because we're seeing an increase in teens actually acting out, and as a direct result of COVID and being locked in and not having that coping mechanism that both of you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, James, I think that you're spot on, where, like, especially with youth ministers, that you can plug into them, and they're engaged with these juveniles on a weekly, or at least a weekly basis for different activities. And it's almost the same thing for teachers that are observing their students on a daily basis, where they couldn't do that in the past. So if there's something that they can see that just doesn't seem right, they can pull that individual to the side and say, hey, what's bothering you? And is there something that I can do to make a difference in your life, to improve it, to make it better? And then also, their peers, their close peer support, where you can ask them, hey, I noticed that they're having some concerning behaviors. Do you know if there's something going on at home or in school or whatever the case may be? And when we look at the mental health system right now, I mean, they're overworked, underpaid, underfunded, and the focus is on crisis stabilization and trying to get them stabilized. I've had like one deputy told me he dropped somebody off after a commitment, and literally within before he had finished his report in the parking lot, that individual was walking back out. Once they determined that he wasn't homicidal or suicidal. Which are the Supreme Court parameters to keeping somebody, that they were released.
Just a quick follow. I think that this emphasizes really the need for safety team leaders to be having that outreach with the other teams, teams like the student ministry, teams like the kids ministry, that they're encountering potential for kids in crisis or even leakage that they can identify through behavior of the kids coming as a result of negative actions occurring from parents. So it may not just be an abusive situation, but it can be a tell, or can give you an insight into something that's going on there that could lead to something more severe. So I think it couldn't be more important than now to have a safety director reach out to those other ministry leads and say, hey, you know what? It's important not just for there to be sharing of information across leads. It's important for them to be communicating to their students the continual need to see something, say something. If something's going on at home, if something's going on with a friend, it's important to tell somebody so we can get them the right help that they need. That's that early chance to prevent a situation from boiling over.
Absolutely. And, most of the school offenders have all had an accumulation of what's referred to as adverse childhood experiences. And this was garnered out of a study from Kaiser Permanente in San Diego. It's like 16,000, 15,000 people that they surveyed. And what they found was that the more of these adverse childhood experiences, the more likely the individual would have a dysfunctional adulthood. Well, for the youthful offenders, the school killers, for example, that their average is 3.4. And when I say 3.4, I'm talking about where they're dealing with divorce, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, substance abuse in the home, criminality, all of these various things that are occurring inside the house that, really make it difficult for a child to advance and have a normal upbringing, so to speak. Now, there are people that have those, like, Gavin DeBecker, for example, is one that, who wrote that phenomenal book, The Gift of Fear. Sure. And if your folks are looking for a book as a good resource, if they haven't read that, they're missing out. It's one of the best books out there. But he grew up in a very, very challenging childhood and was able to overcome that and use that as a foundation to grow what he does today in security.
For sure. And I know some of those situations, it seems like we don't always hear about about the folks that have managed to overcome it. A lot of times it seems like we only hear about the folks that take it to the other extreme, unfortunately, and act out on it, or choose to be destructive with it. But it is a good thought to keep in mind. And that actually, I've read that book as well, and I know we've recommended it multiple times to different people because he is a great author, and there's some great content in there as well.
I mean, especially,
Sure.
We are the only species that will override that inner voice. Animals will flee or fight, whatever the case may be. But we humans will sit there and say, "Oh, maybe it's nothing. Oh, I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to be labeled as something else," and are afraid to speak up until it's too late. And that's why a lot of these, despite the amount of leakage, and again, 80% of them are, giving some sort of pre-incident leakage. It's only after the event that we learn about a lot of this, and people come forward and say, "Oh, well, I knew about this, but I just didn't." There was one person that I dealt with where, he was making direct threats, and he was in a very small community in a tattoo parlor, for example, and everybody said, "Well, that's just crazy, Jimmy, Bobby, Billy, whatever his name was," and nobody acted upon his threats. And as it turned out, he actually started going down the path of violence to actually carry that out. And fortunately, he was stopped ahead of time.
There was an individual at my church, and I think, Mike, you probably remember this story. I think it happened sometime last year, but there was an individual that had some mental concerns, and it was kind of interesting. At one point he actually brought a machete to our church. And what was interesting about it was I found out about it in advance because I had a teen that actually came to me and said, I don't know if it's a big deal or not, but, so-and-so has actually said that they regularly carry like a machete in their backpack, and they're always carrying their backpack with them. And they were kind of joking around and making a comment that the security team at the church had never discovered it. And so that when I heard that information, that teen came to me and said, look, maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing, but I'm not comfortable with this. The fact that, this individual is trying to hide, a weapon from law enforcement and folks that are trying to protect people, look into this. That was something that I took very seriously because I knew more about the individual, and his background. And so the next time I saw the individual, he had his bag. We actually stopped him and did a bag search. And sure enough, he had a machete in his bag. And, the reasoning was,
I mean, don't we all go to church carrying our machetes?
I guess, I don't know. I don't personally, but when I stopped him, his reasoning was, well, I walk through a bad neighborhood to come to church. And I said, but you didn't walk today. Someone brought you. And which I knew. And he was like, well, yeah. And I said, so you really don't need it today. Right. So we had a good conversation, and thankfully it resulted in kind of a lot of de-escalation and just talking to him and saying, look, this is probably not appropriate, and in a nice way. And we weren't like condescending or anything, but we just said directly, this isn't acceptable behavior. So, you need to stop doing this. And so far, he's complied with it, and we've addressed it accordingly. So, but again, I know a lot of times, one of the questions actually that we just got was, how do you see social media posts if they aren't on your church page? And oftentimes someone will post something like on Facebook or something like that on their own page and tag the church or come back and make a comment or something like that. And really, I go back to the whole machete thing. The only reason I knew about it was because someone came to me and said, this doesn't seem right. And so I credit that to really just trying to build a culture of like what Mike said earlier, see something, say something. And I know a lot of that we're kind of getting away from, from the federal folks. There's other statements that we're throwing out there, but the see something, say something has, I think, been around since September 11th, really.
Yep.
And from that standpoint, it's like, look, if you can build a culture in your church, regardless of the size, that someone is willing to come to you, if for those of you that are security folks listening, they're willing to come to you and say, you know what, this just doesn't seem right. There's something going on here. Or maybe I noticed someone posting something on social media that was a little bit negative to the church, or it was condescending, or self-harm, was indicated in that, or that sort of thing. That's what you want to do, because that builds the level of importance of being able to collect that information and then partner with someone to make the decision as far as how to handle it from there and how to move forward. So,
yeah, and we don't know what we don't know. And,
absolutely,
we have to rely on people to report this. And, sadly, there's been a number of instances where people have taken the initiative and then it wasn't acted upon.
Right.
Like, for example, the Parkland massacre, in which, the police responded to his home. I believe it was in the neighborhood about like 43 times, 21 times to see him. And, of course, again, the police departments are understaffed right now, but it would have been nice if they didn't at that time, they didn't have a threat management unit to refer this to. And sure. Where one of those deputies could have done that in the past, refer them to the threat management unit. But, you have to consider that 75% of the police departments across the U.S. have 25 officers or less, so that they have limited resources to investigate these kinds of cases. And, but in this day and time, we have to take these seriously.
Quick element there too is so often those calls, maybe it was the number of times that they went to that individual's house. A lot of times that reporting system, the actual event or what occurred to drive that call, or that call for service, if you will, by the police department, sometimes gets resolved with just notes. Well, those notes don't necessarily create patterns or trends. They're just notes. They're buried. It's lost in history of somebody manually going through and reading it, versus a closure code of some sort where you closed it with a certain sort of report or sort of cause. Well, when you see that, you start to see trends of an individual, and you start to see an address coming up and being re-hit multiple times. That's where you could start to get some real analysis out of it, even in understaffed departments. But I want to circle back quick. I know we're running.
That's where the analyst is important too.
Yes.
If they have a crime analyst. Yep.
Absolutely. I want to go back because I know we hit a little bit, a lot on kind of the mental illness potential of boiling over, but also want to kind of really make sure that we call out the fact that it doesn't take somebody who's mentally ill to have a breaking point and to boil over. You can have a completely, I guess, quote unquote, normal individual, not on medication, not previously diagnosed, not with a lot of leakage, still turn into a mass killer.
Absolutely. And I always, it drives me nuts when I hear, people being described as, well, they just snapped, because I say, hey, people don't wake up in the morning and hit their snooze alarm and decide, hey, I'm going out on a mass killing today. It's a discernible path of violence that you can sit there and watch these people, moving towards that goal of engaging in a mass killing, where they're starting to acquire weapons, or in the case of like a church, where they're showing up and conducting surveillance out in front of the church, asking questions. For example, the Charleston shooter, or killer, I should say, he was arrested at a mall in Columbia, South Carolina. And he was walking around to various stores asking some, concerning questions. What's your staffing? What time do you get off? And he was dressed in all black. And, fortunately, they did the right thing and they reported him to the police. Now, I don't know the depth of the investigation. They ended up finding some narcotics on him, and he was arrested for that time period, which took him off the street. But, obviously the root of his problems was never addressed. But you're right, Mike. I mean, there are people out there that have not been diagnosed with any mental illness. And, I would say that it's not an act of sanity to go out and kill a massive number of people. But still, that there are people that have never been diagnosed with any sort of mental illness that go on these attacks.
Absolutely.
For sure. Mike, did you want to either Mike, did you want to add anything? Because we are coming to the end of our time, so we do need to wrap up. But
a final thought, I think, it really more on the preparedness, the response side, I think, is there's so much out there, and maybe Mike, you could kind of give your opinion on kind of the direction, because I mean, you got Alice and Craze and Run, Hide, Fight, Lockdown, Leave, Live, and I think the more current many are using is ADD, Avoid, Deny, Defend. Have you heard? Is there preference one way or the other? Did Secret Service push one versus? I've seen them all over the place.
No, so our approach was always to try to mitigate the violence before it ever occurs. And like I said, once the 911 calls are made, or shots are fired, it's too late. So, but when they do occur, the thing I always stress to people is, know your exits and try to put as much distance between you and the attacker as you possibly can, because it's difficult to hit a moving target. So, start running and try to get as far away as you possibly can.
Yep, absolutely. And not necessarily just a straight line either.
No,
Be
exactly.
Be unpredictable. Don't
Yes.
create an easy target. And I think create that distance. I think that's important. And we mentioned in the beginning of the show how churches are not exactly a cover and concealment rich environment.
Right.
So you really don't have a whole lot of spots that you can run short of an exit. In fact, some of the churches I've been in have pipe and drape walls in some cases in order to create separation. Well, obviously that's not going to stop anything. It'll create some concealment maybe, but there's a lot of limitations there from that perspective.
I've been to some church services where, they didn't have a physical church yet. So they were using the local school cafeteria, and
Yep.
everybody's sitting at lunch tables. So you even have less places to, at least a pew you can, drop down, and you've got the wood to hopefully, stop some of the incoming rounds. But, that's not always the case.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Or like on an Easter, where they're, I know I live in Florida, so they had, Easter services, sunrise services on the beach. You're outdoors, and, again, there's no place to hide except to run.
For sure. It's definitely an interesting situation, but anyhow, for sake of time, I appreciate you joining us on this broadcast, and unfortunately, we've got to wrap up because of time, and we're running out of time. But thank you so much again for joining us, and we did post the link in the comments. So if you are actually watching this or listening to this at another time, you'll find the link across the board with everything. So the book that Mike wrote is called Mass Killers, and we definitely would encourage you to pick up a copy. And I think you would definitely benefit from going through his systematic approach to looking at some of these things. So definitely take a look at that if you're looking for resources. And again, if there's ever anything, those of you church safety and security teams that are watching this or listening, if there's ever anything that we can do for you, please feel free to reach out to us through our website, which is churchsafetyguys.com. And we would be happy to help you as much as possible. So until next time, next week, have a great week. God bless. Take care.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams. Join the discussion online, and for other great resources, download the Church Security app or visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and Semper Disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.